Well, has the has there been any indication from a former president Medvedev or from anybody in the Kremlin that the military is about to get serious?
Well, from the standpoint of Russian television, the military already is serious. We don't. There are a lot of things that have been covered by the Western press right now. Among them, the daily advance towards Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, the two remaining fortresses, on a very smaller scale than the cities that Russian forces have already captured in Donetsk Oblast. They are approaching 18 kilometers away from Slavyansk. Well, that's artillery range, of course. Let's get that straight, what it means to be 18 kilometers away. So it means they're pounding. And they're preparing and softening up for what would be the taking. We also, the news we know this, and this is no big secret, that the Russians are preparing a summer offensive. Right now, they're very satisfied. Again, the latest news in Russian state television, they're very satisfied that spring has already come to Ukraine. That means that there's a lot of mud, of course, but is going up. And so what compensates for the difficulties in navigating the arteries or the roads, such as the logistics, is that they have cover. The trees are starting to come out of bloom. That means that artillery and other offensive weapons are easier to hide. And that gives the Russians a big advantage in what has been the main risk that all of their offensives are faced in the form of Ukrainian kamikaze and spy drones.
You used the phrase shockwave or shockwaves twice already. What is the Kremlin's opinion of Trump? Do they think he's a madman? Do they think he's unpredictable? Do they think he knows what he's doing? Do they think he's trustworthy? Is a handshake with him worth it?
Well, if there was any belief that a handshake was gone for good, the best you can say about the Kremlin approach to Donald Trump is to humor him and to pretend but not to have any expectations of success because he and his swindler convoys are not worthy of any trust. That is their evaluation. It will be outwardly, well, the Chinese are even more mild in the same way, while thinking that Trump is impossible. You'll note that the Chinese never disinvited him. They waited for him to postpone the visit indefinitely because he's busy with the war. So they never closed the door on him, as literally, but practically speaking, they didn't want to see his face invasion.
Right. They didn't. I don't think President Xi wanted to see a photograph of himself shaking hands with Donald Trump on the front page of the Financial Times. Not the post-Iran invasion Donald Trump. I guess we can conclude that the Western sanctions on Russia are not going away during Trump's presidency.
Probably, but there is a dispute going on here in EU membership. As you know, I also have a Belgian identity card, and I follow very closely what the Prime Minister here is doing because it's remarkable. In his own way, he is a bigger mover and shaker of the terrible consensus here in the EU member states than either Orban or Fico. He is very careful when he says and does. He has defended himself in the last couple of days over a statement he made in an interview with a French-speaking financial newspaper, Echo de la Bourse, which was picked up by Financial Times and put on their front page, that he was calling for normalization of relations with Russia. And he is explaining that it doesn't mean that normalization should take place now, but normalization should take place once a peace treaty takes forms and sight. And here is the critical point. That sounds like he's backtracking again. Not at all. Because he's saying what no one else has the guts to say. That a peace treaty is a peace treaty, not just a scrap of paper. And it indicates that all the sources of the conflict have been removed. And that you normalize relations, you restore normal trade with the people who were your enemies. Now that detailed explanation tells you that Mr. DeHaver has his head screwed on right, whereas 90% of the EU member state leaders don't.
Yes. Has the resignation of the chief counterterrorism official had access to the same intel as the President, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, head of the CIA, etc., resonated? I mean, in his resignation letter, he said, Iran poses no imminent threat to our nation. The President was duped by Israeli officials and U.S. media who created an echo chamber around it. It's about as strong language as you can imagine.
Well, in Russia, that has gone almost unnoticed. What I will say is that the Russians are enjoying black humor around the United States. They are mocking the United States. Any sense of respect for the United States is gone. There's fear of the United States. Not because they think Trump is a man, but because of what he's doing with the help of Nixon. At my privileged club of francophones here in Brussels, when the mamas were saying, "Oh, our sons will profit from discipline." On the left side is a marble tablet listing the names of club members who were killed in World War I. Somehow nobody stops and looks at them. They're proud of their parties.
Almost inconceivable. Your grandson is Belgian. It's almost inconceivable. Belgian troops to be involved in the war in Iran or the war in Ukraine.
We had enough sense years ago to ensure that he has a U.S. passport also.
Oh, thanks be to God. Here's a little breaking news. Jeremy Scahill, we all know, formerly of The Intercept, now Drop Site News, reports that Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff has been, quote, desperately texting Iranian Foreign Minister Aragachi to jumpstart ceasefire talks, but Iran has completely ignored him. The U.S. is looking for a way out while pretending they are winning. What do you think, Gilbert?
I think it's a very accurate and sober appraisal. Look, listening to President before his so-called accident in the helicopter, listening to the current foreign minister of Iran, the impression, the overwhelming impression, that these people are with dignity, self-respect, and circumspect. They are not, in any sense, radical terrorists. Oh, the rubbish is being thrown at them by the Washington elites. This is all utterly wrong. And so I concur with several people who appeared on the show who agree that this what was said by the foreign minister accurately reflects the situation. And what Donald Trump said, that they had been discussions and the Iranians hadn't given him the terms he wants, was an outright outrageous lie.
Watch this interview of the Iranian foreign minister from Sunday, 3 days ago. Chris, cut number 1.
President Trump said this weekend he is not ready to make a deal with Iran because the terms aren't good enough yet. Has Iran asked for a ceasefire?
No, we never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never asked even for negotiation. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as and this is what we have done so far, and we continue to do that until President Trump comes to the point that this is an illegal victory, and people being killed only because President Trump wants to have fun. This is what he has said.
Have fun?
We are not. Yes, this is what he said, that they are sinking, ships, targeting different places because it is fun.
It is true that Trump said that. It's remarkable that the chief correspondent for CBS News didn't know or acted as if she didn't know that he said it. Before you respond, I have another one from the foreign minister, which is earlier today, just a few hours ago. Chris, number 19.
We are not seeking a ceasefire because we do not want this scenario to be repeated again after some time. Rather, we want the war to end completely and permanently. Let it die. Our position is the same as what I've stated here, and we have also conveyed it to our friends. We do not accept a ceasefire. However, if there is an idea for ending the war that meets our conditions so that the war ends permanently across the entire region and the damages suffered by Iran are compensated, we will certainly listen to it.
You analyze that, Gilbert.
Perfectly aligned with Russia's position of the war on and in Ukraine. As I said, the Donald Trump, I will post later today on my Substack most recent statement in English. It is when you end a war, it's not a ceasefire. You end a war with a peace treaty that is made in good faith and seeks to resolve the points of difference that led to the war and to resume normal relations after the peace is signed. That is exactly what the Iranian foreign minister is saying. Of course, he goes on to speak of reparations. In the Russian case, that doesn't apply. But in the Iranian case, it certainly does.
Gilbert Doctorow, thank you, my dear friend. Great analysis as always. Just terrific analysis. Can you do me a favor and pound some sense into your grandson's head and that of his friends?
Our grandson is right on line. He knows his life is worth something, and this war is nonsense. But his friends need
Gilbert, all the best. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Coming up later today, 1 o'clock this afternoon, from wherever he is, Pepe Escobar. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, another view from Europe, our friend Professor Glenn Beeson. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, the great Phil Giraldi, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.
So, good afternoon, class. Today we do death by gerontocracy. Gerontocracy just means ruled by old people. Last class, we discussed the decline of Western society and civilization and why it's happening. We discussed the theories. Today, we will look at what the reality on the ground is, what the actual trends are, what are the concrete examples of decline in the Western world. All right, so let me start with this young man. His name is Axel Ruda Cubana, and he was 17 years old when last year he took a knife and he walks into a dance studio in Southport, Britain, and then he proceeds to stab the little girls inside the dance studio, and they are 5, 6, 7. He kills 3 of them. He is quickly arrested by the police. And as you can see, he is a very disturbed young man. He's carrying out mental illness, otherwise, why would he kill children?
Por favor, señor.
Behind bars. So he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So justice was done. What happens next is that all throughout Britain, there are riots and protests. What happened was that rumors started to spread about the attack. They claimed that the young man was an asylum seeker, an immigrant. And because there are too many immigrants coming into England, everyone's safety is at stake. So as you see, these protests were extremely heated. They were extremists, they were anti-immigrant, and ultimately it led to violence between the police and the protesters. And this is happening all throughout Britain. Last summer, the country of England burned, basically. Literally burned. Okay? So these protesters were setting cars on fire. And they were targeting immigrants in Britain. Remember that this 17-year-old boy is actually not an immigrant. He was born in Wales to parents who were from Rwanda. Okay, so he is a British citizen. As you can see, the men who participated in the protest, they're not sad about what they're doing. They feel virtuous. They feel righteous. They feel proud for protecting their people against immigrants. So the question is, why is this happening? Why are all these immigration throughout the Western world? So this is happening in the United States led to the victory of Donald Trump in last year's elections in the United States. A lot of conflict comes from the fact that immigration is happening too fast in the Western world. So after COVID, you see this large spike in immigrants. The other issue is that most of these immigrants are coming from countries in the Middle East, in Africa, in East Asia. So it's clear from you. Okay, so before there might have been a lot of Europeans, mainly countries outside of Europe. So the British people feel as though they're being invaded by foreigners. The demographic changes to British society are stark. So I'm not sure if you can see this clearly, okay? But like the dark brown are places where in the past 5-10 years, the immigrant population has tripled 3 times, okay? And as you can see, there are quite a few pockets where immigration is sort of overwhelming the local population. Britain, there are some places where you feel this is like Morocco, or Rwanda, or maybe even Egypt. Okay? So the British people feel they're under siege. So this is Australia, okay? So Australia after COVID, huge spike in immigration. And most of them are coming from non-European countries. So the greatest spike is in India, but then you also have China and the Philippines as well. These are the three major sources of immigrants to Australia. Okay. Same is happening in France, where you're seeing a huge spike in immigration. And again, most of the immigrants are coming from African or Middle Eastern countries. The French feel as though their culture is being diluted, it's being attacked and invaded.
Diluted.
Europe, the UK, France, Italy, and Germany are seeing a huge spike in immigrants and refugees. And so their culture feels threatened. What's also happening is a huge spike in inflation. Okay, so this is something called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is just measuring the price of basic goods, like food and shelter. Okay, as you can see, there's a huge spike in prices. So as these immigrants are coming into your country, you also feel as though your quality of life is getting worse and worse. It's getting harder for you to afford basic goods like rent and food. It's getting harder for you to support your family. Major increase is in housing prices. Okay, so Canada has seen a huge influx of immigrants, and this has caused the United States, which has a much larger economy than Canada. The housing prices are pretty stable. You can still afford to buy a house if you're a young person in the United States, not in Canada. Okay, you see this huge spike in Canada. The housing prices are now unaffordable. This is a chart that shows you economic growth as compared to housing prices. So as you can see in the United States, housing prices, there's a correlation between income and housing prices. And this is pretty reasonable. In Canada, okay? So GDP, housing prices, skyrocketed. And that's why Canadians feel as though the Canadian dream of one day having their own house is basically dead. So what she's saying is that as Canada lets in more immigrants, and as property prices go up, you would think that they would build more and more houses. But as you can see, housing supply is, even though immigration is going up. Does anyone know why this would be the case? Why is it that you have a policy of letting in more immigrants, or a policy of letting in more? That's kind of strange, right? Can anyone guess why that would be the case?
No. Okay.
Sorry, can you speak in the microphone? Thank you.
Okay, maybe they want to make sure that the housing's not affordable, maybe because they want to make more money. Because now there's like more competition for housing. Definitely, as you said, the prices of housing was like going like skyrocketing, and people would make more money. Like people who provide the housings would naturally real estate people make more money.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. Okay, so policy is not being controlled by what people. It's controlled by vested interests that will make money off the process, right? Can make money off this process. But the people who benefit the most actually are property owners, right? So if you have a house, and the supply is constant, but the demand goes up, then you know from economics class that the value of a house increases artificially. So it's making homeowners very happy. Okay? And that's why you have this crisis in Canada. The other issue that's really problematic in the Western world is that as the number of immigrants goes up, in the population, you're not having children. Okay, so this is Canada. Birth rate. Okay, the blue is the birth rate. Okay, it's steadily going down. Going up. So it's the immigrants who provide most of the new people in Canada. In fact, right now, 25%, a quarter of all Canadians are first-generation immigrants. First-generation Canadians, meaning that they're immigrants to the country. And if you just look at this trend, in 40 years' time, 50 years' time, there will be very few white Canadians in Canada. And this is causing a lot of conflict and tension in the country. So you have these huge issues. Housing is unaffordable. Inflation is going up. Ethnic tensions are increasing. But the Canadian government still insists on increasing the number of immigrants in the country. There's no possible go back where you know what, let's have a moratorium. Clearly, our policy is slowing down. In fact, as you can see, they're actually going to wrap up the process. The goal for Canada, right now, Canadian population is about 35 to 40 million people. They want 100 million people in Canada by the year 2100. And guess what? The majority of these people are going to come from India and probably China. Okay? And as we discussed, the percentage of immigrants of the total population is just rapidly increasing. So in Australia, it's almost a third now. In Canada, it's a quarter. And these percentages will go up. More and greater ethnic tension and immigrant protests within these countries. As you can see, the number of immigrants coming from India far surpasses that of other countries, okay? And these are just legal immigrants. We're not counting in students. So there are millions and millions of Indian students right now in Canada on student visas. And they're looking for permanent residency, to citizenship. And that's what leads to situations like this. Videos online where you have thousands and thousands of Indian students lining up for hours and hours because they're applying for a minimum wage job at a restaurant. For these Indian students, it's just terrible. A lot of them live 8 to a room. Okay? There's one room that was meant for one person. There are now 8 students living in that room. At the same time, what's really interesting is that the Indians are now an extremely powerful global force in Canada. This was the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, meeting with representatives of the Indian community because he depends on them for his votes. In last year's federal election, 22 Indian people of Indian descent were elected. Okay, so in Parliament, there's 243 seats. 22 of them now are Indian. How many Chinese? How many MPs of Chinese origin? There are less than 10. So even though the Chinese have been there long, more numerous Chinese than Indians, but a lot of it is because Indians come from democracy, so they're very good at debate. They're very good at organizing. They're very good at action. And that's what leads them to excel in the Canadian political system. At the same time, we can imagine that if current trends continue, if the immigrant population from India increases, and if the Indians continue to amass power, there could be a situation where in like 20 or 40 years' time. So there's a real risk that the population is replaced by the Indians. And this is happening elsewhere as well. Yes, a question.
All the Indian immigrants that you have mentioned took a part of the Canadian population. How about the having the risk of
Canadians took over Canadian, but how about the people that is local? Or the green resident, those that are homeless, immigrants? Right, okay. That's a great question, okay? So immigrants are suffering. Population is something even more because as we and it's pretty rapid decline. So it's harder for young people to find jobs, especially with immigrants coming into the country, right? Prices are very expensive nowadays, so it's very hard for young people to live and work in big cities. So as these immigrants are coming into the country, they're putting tremendous pressure on the local population. And that's why there's so much ethnic tension throughout the Western world right now. Okay, so this leads us to a paradox. If immigrants are making life for everyone, especially young people, who's the future of these nations, I want you guys to keep this in the back of your mind. You probably know the answer already because you know how property prices work, right? Okay, so let's move on to the topic. So Canada, like 10 years ago, introduced a new policy called MAID, called Medical Assistance in Dying, euthanasia. And the idea here is that if you feel life is meaningless, if you're depressed, if you feel that you cannot cure your disease, the government will help you kill yourself. The government will let you die. Now, the big question then is, yeah, but 25 years ago, this was illegal in the world, right? Suicide was illegal. If you help someone kill himself, you'll be put in prison. This would be basically. So what's the difference between suicide and the government helping you kill yourself? Well, there really isn't. Okay, so the government isn't for sure. Suicide is bad. Okay, suicide is bad, but suicide by government is good. Okay, and it's really stupid. It's disgusting. It's disgustingly stupid. Okay, what they say is that if you do suicide, well, you do it alone and you shock your friends and family. But if you do MAID, then everyone knows you're killing yourself, and so they won't be so sad when you die. Right? If you kill yourself, you might screw it up. But if the government does it for you, you won't screw it up because it's being facilitated by professionals who know what they're doing. Right? If you think this is stupid, there's more stupidity to come. Right? And what this tells us is, we discussed this last class, is one major sign of declining society is the over-bureaucratization of society. The government interferes in everything. Okay? This is the number of deaths from euthanasia in Canada. As you can see, in 2016 it started, it about 1,000. By 2021, it's at 10,000. Okay? So the numbers are going up really rapidly. Why? Well, because if you want to kill yourself, they won't stop you. This is the number of days required to be approved for suicide. As you can see in the Netherlands, sorry, this is Oregon actually, this is Oregon, United States. Okay, the number of days have been going down, but it's still like at most a month, okay? In Canada, they'll do it in like 10 days. They won't even think about it. Like, you want to kill yourself? Do it then. Good for you. Good choice.
You want to kill yourself? Do it, man.
To not do any harm, right? Well, and death ought to be the last resort. In Canada, death is now the first resort. If you go to a doctor and say, I'm going to die, the doctor say, sure, let's do it, man. That's pretty disgusting. Alright. Why are you killing the... So, like, if you see, the number of approval rates are going way up. It seems as though they have a quarter. This is 2019. Only 75% were approved. Now it's 81%. It's almost like they have a quarter. They're trying to kill as many people as possible. As you can see, this number is the percentage of people of euthanasia. Netherlands, which for the longest time, and yeah, it's going up, but this huge spike is Canada. Okay? It seems as though Canada's in a rush to kill as many people as possible. So who's dying? Yeah, okay, you have a question.
So the suicide of Canada is not insulation. Is that also a type of insulation?
No, okay. Alright, so suicide is when you kill yourself. Euthanasia is when a doctor helps you kill yourself. Euthanasia means good death. It means like you will die painlessly. No, okay. Euthanasia is by government. Okay. Alright, so why do we die? Cancer. What's interesting about cancer is that it's the most expensive disease to treat, right? Well, that's interesting. And a lot of cancer, it's pretty painful, but it's not terminal. You can still live with cancer, right? So it seems as though people with cancer are being encouraged to die because they're a burden on the system. Which means who's dying? More people are dying, right? It's pretty obvious. And this is even more interesting. If the government were to prove your death, right, it would be the last option. But let's understand why people are killing themselves. And there are two main reasons. The first major reason is loss of ability to engage in meaningful activities. It's because they're not happy. This is a lame reason to kill yourself. Also, loss of ability to perform activities of daily living. It's harder for you to go buy groceries. It's harder for you to walk around. So again, what's happening is that poor people are dying. And poor people are encouraged to kill themselves because the poor are being a burden on the medical system. And that's the entire basis of euthanasia. So let me ask you this question. Why is it that 25 years ago, we discouraged euthanasia? In fact, we illegal to conduct euthanasia. Even if the person was suffering from brain cancer, the person was just
Porque
basically
necesitábamos esa mano de obra.
every day,
Sí.
and would not allow euthanasia. Why not?
Porque necesitábamos una mano de obra.
Yeah.
Maybe because it was like harder to regulate, like the procedures
No.
to take.
No,
Because it
wrong
was, like,
answer.
Such a new thing. You have no control over what the companies will like provide the service to,
Yeah.
or like what they do to their patients. I wouldn't even say patients, but like people who purchase their services, and also all because again it's such a novel thing. Companies involved, the medical companies involved, maybe what maybe to me loopholes. And it was, if I was the government, I consider that as good, but potential danger is something that
Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's a very interesting answer, okay? What it tells me is that the society you live in is very different from the society I grew up in, okay? Because 25 years ago, when I was younger, we were taught that every life matters. Every life is a gift from God. In a society, we have to protect everyone, especially the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. Because that's how we come together as a society. If we just let anyone die, then how do you know that you'll be protected? Right? So what matters then was about social cohesion. And now what matters is just numbers. How much does this cost me? How much revenue will this generate? Okay, so that's this. Before we cared about social cohesion, we cared about morality. Nowadays, it's all just money, money, money. And this is interesting for us, okay? Another sign of decline is growing financialization. We talked about this last time, right? Well, guess what's happening? The stock markets throughout the world, it's booming, okay? It's booming. If you're a rich person, you're getting richer and richer. 10% of the population owns 9% of the stocks in America. Okay, so this is an indicator of how wealthy the rich in the past 20 years. In the year 2008, if you bought for $7. Now it's like $300, okay? So, how wealthy the rich become due to government policies. At the same time, we talked about this last class, productivity, real economy, the amount of work you do, it's going way down. So we have this absurd situation where the big economy, the financial economy is going way up, but the real economy of jobs, of people doing work, of being productive, it's going way down. Okay? Meaning that we live in a fake world. And the government responds by lying to people. Okay? People know their lives suck. People know that basically we're facing a recession. That's what the facts say. The government, and what does the government do? The government says that, oh, it's not really a recession. What it really is a state of transition. Okay, this is what we call gaslighting. Splitting gaslighting. Rather than just saying, you know what, the economy is in trouble, and we feel your pain, and we're gonna work hard to solve the problem, they're telling you, no, it's not black, it's white, guys. You're lying, your eyes, they're lying to you. Don't you see? You're not seeing clearly. Get new glasses, and your life will be a lot better. That's like literally what they're telling you. Debt, right? We talked about this last class as well. This is U.S. debt. You can see how the debt is booming, okay? So up until the year 1980, for 20 years, America's existence, there was very little debt. Now, look at this, okay? America right now is $37 trillion in debt. That's the government, okay? The people with the credit card debt, the mortgages, they owe $17 trillion. They're never paying that off. So basically the middle class in America, it's finished. Okay? The government has no more resources. This is what decline looks like. No one's having children anymore. Okay, so the world sucks, and young people are like, screw this, I'm not having kids. Okay, this is happening throughout the world. Canada is selling its resources to outside investors. Okay, so oil is going to keep making its resource. As you can see, a lot of the big players in Canada are actually American or overseas. When it says Canada, it usually means British people. So Canadians don't own their own resources anymore. So let's summarize what we've learned today. Okay? Let's look at the signs of Western decline. You got higher property prices. And this happened throughout the Western world. Inflation and lower quality of life. Higher stock market valuations, which means further inequality. Less real economic growth, less people are doing real jobs. Euthanasia for the poor, just killing off the poor people. Mass immigration, population replacement. Lower birth rate, greater public and private debt, bureaucratic gaslighting. The government no longer acknowledges the problem, it just lies to you directly. And privatization as a strict. Okay? So all this is happening in the Western world. The question now is, why would this happen? And there are different theories, okay? And we'll go over some of the major theories. There's lots and lots of theories. We'll go over the major ones. And there's going to be overlap between these theories. And some of these theories make a lot of sense. Okay, so one major theory is the idea of neoliberalism. The idea of neoliberalism is the belief that all that matters in society, all that matters in life is economic growth. If your society can generate more economic growth, all problems will be solved. Okay? So if your economy runs really fast, then everyone will be happy. That's the idea of neoliberalism. Then you have techno-feudalism, which is the idea that some big corporations, usually these tech companies, they want to control the world. And so they want to turn everyone into slaves. And if you don't have a house, you don't have your own property, then you can be controlled by these companies. Okay? Techno-feudalism. World government, where the United Nations has this conspiracy to control the entire world, to destroy national sovereignty and create a world unified government, okay? Population replacement theory. And the idea here is that the problem for governments in the Western world is that white people are opinionated. They believe in democracy. They believe in freedom. And they're hard to control. So let's replace the white people with Chinese and Indians and Filipinos, because Asian people are more obedient, right? That's the idea. And again, these are just theories. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. Okay? And we'll go into these theories later on the semester. Now, the last reason is bureaucratic and complicated. This government is just stupid. Okay? Now, there's been overlap among these theories, and there's some validity to all these theories. But what I want to show you is that there's actually a much better way to analyze this. Whenever you have a problem, you always ask yourself, who benefits? Who is benefiting from this, right? So when we're talking about housing prices, well, clearly property owners are benefiting from this, right? So if we took all the groups, okay, and there's like millions of different groups in society, we just analyze who benefits from all these trends that we discussed. The answer you would get is rich pensioners. These are the people who benefit the most from these trends. And therefore, we're going to suspect that they're the ones behind these trends, okay? So let's go over them. Property prices make sense, right? Because they're old, they have houses. They probably have 2 or 3 houses. So they want to see the property prices go up. Higher stock market valuations make sense because they own the most stocks. Euthanasia of the poor makes sense because they want good medical care. If poor people are standing in line, that's a problem for them, right? So just kill the poor people and they'll have better access to health care. Right? If that frees up the healthcare system. Mass immigration needs cheap labor. If they're old, they're 70 or 80 years old, they need gardeners, they need cooks, they need nurses. Right? Immigrants. Do you guys want to be gardeners and cooks and laborers? We don't want to be, so we need immigrants. And everything else, okay? Inflation, economic growth, lower birth rate, gaslighting, it doesn't really affect them. Does that make sense? So all these trends, some of them are really good for these pensioners, and the rest doesn't really affect the pensioners. And that's why we can assume, for analysis, that the rich pensioners who are most responsible for what's going on. Does that make sense to you guys? All right. So how do we understand this? Well, the problem that we're facing is never in human history have we had so many old rich people before. Okay? And you can see these trends where in the year 1900, people who are 75 and older were just a small fraction of society. You can see how fast they're growing. Okay? Over 60 years old, really growing really fast. There's a problem because if they keep on living, they accumulate more and more resources, which creates a lot more inequality. Now, I'm not saying that all old people are rich. In fact, that's not the case. If you just look at statistics, you will find that wealth is pretty much even distributed among demographics, okay? So there are young people with a lot of money, but there are more old people with money. So there are lots and lots of old people, the purple are old people, who are poor. I'm not saying that old people are the problem, I'm saying that old rich people are the problem. They're a problem because they want their pensions. The pension systems in all societies make assumptions about old people. The major assumption that they made is that old people would die, right? So, for example, in Canada, when they first created the pension system, the retirement age was 65, and they expected people to die when they're 72. So you have 5 to 7 years of a good pension, okay? Guess what, guys? They're not dying, right?
They're not dying.
Problem with your pension plan. And you can see how these liabilities are going up over time. These are teachers, and as you can see, the liabilities are going way up. Why is this happening? It's happening because of assumption changes, okay? So 2 assumptions are being made. First is that old people will die. Well, they're not dying. The other assumption is that if you put money in the stock market, it will year by year improve, right? The problem is that there's volatility in the stock market. It goes up, it goes down. And the smart people make money off dumb people. Guess what, guys? Okay, I'm not sure question. In finance, where do the dumbest people work? You guys know? In finance, the dumbest people work where? They work in pension funds. Why? Because it's a boring job. You just sit there and do nothing all day. So these pension funds are constantly getting ripped off from investment banks where the smart people are. Okay, so if you look at all investment vehicles, pension funds have lost the most money. And this has created huge issues within government pension funds throughout the world. Okay, so as you can see, there's volatility in returns in the pension fund. Okay, when you put the money in, the returns will differ year by year. That screws up your model. If you're a young person, do not put money in the pension fund. Why? Because the value of the pension fund is going drastically down. When you grow up, when you mature and you retire, guess what, guys? There's no money in the pension fund for you because all that money is gone. Why? Because there are too many retirees and not enough workers. All right, so back in the year 2001, you had a problem. You had 7.6 retirees for every 12.7 workers. This is, you basically, the ideal is 1 to 3. So 1 pensioner, 3 workers. That's a healthy pension system. Now you have more pensioners, okay, than you have workers. This is a huge problem. These pensions will bankrupt in 5-10 years' time. At the same time, as I said, old people are not dying. In fact, old people are coming to dominate society. This is America. You can see how people who are 85 and older. Whoa, look at this. Look at this. The aging crisis in America is huge. But it's not just America, it's everywhere. Right? So, by the year 2040, you have 65 million people in America who are over 65. You have 15 million Americans who are 85. And guess what? 15 Americans, most of them are the ones who control America. So they dictate policy. And again, this is happening throughout the world, okay? It's particularly starting in Japan and Germany, but it's happening throughout the world. And this leads us to the idea of gerontocracy, okay? This is Joe Biden, President of the United States, and this is Mitch McConnell, who is head of the Senate. They're both retired now, okay? But they were both in their 80s, and they were the two most powerful men in America. He can't walk straight, okay? Whenever he walks, he trips. This guy is even worse because, look at this, the guy's brain dead. The guy is literally brain dead in public, okay? And like, no matter what you do, he's like, this is brain dead, okay?
Qué malo.
The guy, this is a brain freeze. The guy should not be one of the most powerful men in America, but he is. That's the world we live in. Means he will not give up power. This is Dianne Feinstein. She died in office. She was 90 years old. She was 90 years old and she was still working and she
Sí,
died in her
la verdad que
office.
te da un poco de bronca, pero bueno, todos vamos a llegar ahí, ¿qué vamos a hacer?
These people are
Todos vamos a llegar a
literally
viejo.
fighting for life. Okay? They refuse to give up power. They only give up power if they die. This is the U.S. Senate, again, the most powerful global institution in America. These are people who are above the standard retirement age, which is 62, okay? This guy's 90 years old, he's still working. 90 years old, and he's still working in the Senate. And he doesn't want to retire. Chuck Grassley. What does it mean to have a world run by old people? Now, maybe in school, maybe at home you've been taught that old people are wise. They're tolerant. They're generous. They're benevolent. No, guys. No. The difference between these 3 generations, young, mature, and elderly, are pretty stark. You're young, you're rebellious. You want to change the system. You're mature, you want things to move slowly, okay? When you're elderly, you're reactionary, meaning you don't want anything to change. If you change anything, they get upset and slap you. That's reactionary. Young people are creative, mature people want growth, but other people care first and foremost about safety. Young people are open-minded, mature people want consensus, meaning they want everyone to get along, but other people are stubborn. They want things their way. So, we are now living in a gerontocracy which is ruled by elderly people, okay? So we're gonna live in a reactionary, stubborn system, only concerned about the safety of these people. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the world will go into lockdown. When there's a virus, guess what? We're gonna have to shut down because old people are afraid of catching germs. It will also lead to a police state. Okay? Now, police state does not mean that there'll be terrible police come to beat us up. In fact, you know, in real life, most police that you meet are really, really nice people. But you have no individual freedom. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. So in Canada, a Chinese moved to Canada, and she bought a house, and her son is very naughty. And her son was so naughty that she wants to slap him. But she knows that in Canada, you can't really slap children, even in private, right? So she goes online and asks everyone, can I slap my child? And everyone's like, you can't do that, because if you do that, your neighbor should report you to the police. But what you do is report your child to the police. Tell the police your child is naughty, and they'll come and help you discipline your child. In fact, you can come get the police to come every single week. They like that. This is what we call police state, okay? Intrusive government interference into your personal lives. Oh, and lots of surveillance. Okay, wherever you move, you'll be tracked. Whatever call you make, you'll be tracked. In 2003, Britain passed something called the Online Safety Act. The idea is, if you say anything bad online, you can get arrested. Okay, so the freedom of expression is being limited. It's passed in 2023 in Britain, but I assume it'll pass everywhere in the Western world. Digital currency. The idea of digital currency is the idea of financial repression. So they're trying to eliminate cash, because with cash is freedom. You know whatever you want with cash. You can buy whatever you want, or how much you want with cash. With digital currency, all your transactions will be limited and monitored. Okay? So in the future, you will not be able to buy video games because that's bad for you.
Okay.
Oh, microchip implants, guys. Right? Isn't that great? Before you had cell phones, then you had facial recognition, and in the future you have implants, microchip implants. Immigrants, lots and lots of immigrants, because poor people, rich countries need help. They need nurses, they need laborers, they need gardeners, they need people to mow their lawn. So you have massive immigration coming into the country. Oh, but good news, okay? It'll be easier for you to study in America from now on, right? Today, Trump announced he wants 600,000 Chinese students to go to the United States, right? Before, you guys were worried about not getting your visas and getting denied at the border. Don't worry, guys. They want you to go to the United States because you guys are the best labor, okay? You're cheap, you're obedient, and you're studious, and you're young. Okay? So this is the plan, to let in more Chinese students into America so you guys can take care of elderly people. Isn't that great? Good news, right? Oh, lots of prisons, guys. And because elderly people are afraid of criminals. And also, prisoners are free labor. Isn't that great? Oh.
No, it's not great.
War
Not great at all.
After war. Alright? This is what it means by death by gerontocracy. This is what it means to live in a world governed by elderly people. Elderly people are perfectly happy to send young people to die for their glory. Right? Okay. Pretty depressing, but don't worry. Things will get even more depressing as we go on.
No!
Alright? Alright. Good. Any questions? Are you guys clear? Any questions? Yeah.
about that. You said that elders controls the society at once, but they exploit young people. But is there a way that young people could like overthrow or method to solve this?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So what can young people do about this? And the answer is nothing, okay? And the reason why, and this is really the point, is that young people are biologically ingrained to respect the elders, right? This is true throughout nature. Even young animals will respect their elders. So, do you want to go kill your grandparents? Probably not. Okay, so there's nothing anyone can do about this. This is just the unfortunate state of affairs. Okay? Old people are people who are biologically trained or wired to respect and obey. And that's why they can send us to wars, and we'll go fight wars. Okay? Does that make sense? Right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
So what happened after the reach pension elders death? What about the money?
Okay. All right. That's a good question, okay? So, as you can see from these charts, eventually there'll be a pension crisis where there are too many pensioners, not money. Well, guess what? The old people are a major political force in society. They dictate policy. So what will happen is that money will be diverted from elsewhere into pensions. Where? Schooling, right? Public schooling, healthcare, everywhere basically. Okay, but the pensioners will want that money. And pensioners, first of all, they're powerful, but they also have a lot of free time on their hands to make trouble for everyone. And also because respect are the elderly, right? Do you want to deny health care and pension to your grandparents? So everyone will be for this. There's nothing we can do about it. Good question.
Humans life a limit. Like, what will happen after like they all die after that? Because although they are elders and those free pensions, they are still generations of humans.
That's a really great point. Okay, so the idea is that what happens when they die off? Well, they're not dying off. Okay, they were supposed to die at 72. Now they're living to like 100. Modern medicine is incredible. I have a friend who's like 90 years old. She's like literally brain dead. Okay, she's like literally brain dead. She's 90 years old, but she's filthy rich, and she has access to the best healthcare. So I asked my friend, who's a doctor, like, if you're filthy rich and you want to keep on living, how long could modern medicine keep you going on, even though you're vegetable? And he said to me, 20 years. 20 years. 20 years of being vegetable, but she has money, so if she wants to keep on living, then she can do that. Okay? And that was not available before because of scarcity, right? Because of lack of technology. But nowadays, because of abundance, because of technology, old people can live as long as they want to. And also, what this chart tells us that when the green goes away, the red becomes the green, right? So you always have a society where the elderly are in control. Does that make sense? Unless, of course, there were maybe, I don't know, a catastrophe, a nuclear holocaust, who knows, okay? But given the way things are, the trend is that old people can control society for a long time. Because if there's a war, it's not old people who die, it's young people who die. Okay? But good question. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, great. So we'll continue this next class. Okay, thank you.
So, we've done the Greeks and we've done the Israelites, and today we discuss the Persians. And today I introduce to you the most influential person who hasn't lived. His name is Zarathustra. Okay? And Zarathustra will create the world's first great religion, world religion, called Zoroastrianism. this will lead to the rise of the world's first great empire, called the Persian Achaemenid Empire. Okay? So to understand Zarathustra, let's go back and understand how we humans have traditionally understood the world, okay? So intuitively, we've understood that the world is one of consciousness. The universe is conscious. It's constantly vibrating. And these vibrations are infinite. And the lower the vibrations go, the slower they are. And therefore they give rise to matter. Okay? And that gives rise to humans. So we both inhabit the material universe, but our minds inhabit the spiritual universe. And as a result, when we vibrate as well, our consciousness returns to the universe. So we're in constant dialogue with the universe. Now, this is hard to understand, so we can use metaphors or stories to explain this system. All right, so let's go over how we explain the system using metaphors. So this is God, and the God's called a monad, or the one, or nous. But there are different names for this God. And this God is perfect. The problem with perfection is that you lack imagination, you lack creativity. And that's why when God emanates, he created us, okay, humans. Why? Because we are material. We have bodies, and therefore we are imperfect. What this means is that when we hit a wall, we feel pain. We can fall down, we can die, we can suffer, we can make mistakes. At the same time, it is through constantly making mistakes, disobedience, fallibility, that we are able to be creative. Okay? And as a result, both God and we are in the process of becoming. Okay? We're becoming into perfection. We're becoming into eternity and infinity. And so we are co-creators with God. Now, there are certain characteristics about the system that you have to remember. Okay? First of all, in the system, we need a free will. Because only by having complete freedom can we be truly creative. The monad is controlling us, then there can't be any creativity. It's all intentional. It's all planned, okay? So free will is very important. Another very, very important idea is the individual. Okay? So how the system works is, what matters is what happens inside of us. Okay? Because only us individually can give rise to creativity. And so it is our reaction to the monad that's important. Okay? Another way of saying this is that, use a metaphor, okay? The metaphor is a candle. A candle, sorry, this is a bad drawing, okay? Candle. And we are all mirrors surrounding this candle. And we are all, the candle is reflected in us. Okay, so the monad is in us, and we're all part of the monad together. So what happens is, what happens to us individually, okay? Another very important part of this is its eternity, okay? Reincarnation. The idea here is that when you die, you just don't disappear. Your consciousness returns to the spirit world. Why? Because maybe in this world, you made a lot of mistakes. And because you made a lot of mistakes, you can't really appreciate all the pain you've caused. So when you return to the spirit world, then it's a time for you to reflect and understand your significance on this world, okay? And so the idea is that if you've done a lot of good in this world, if you've been virtuous, you ascend to a higher plane. And if you did a lot of bad things, then you stay in the lower realm, okay? And this idea of heaven and hell. Why? Because if you did a lot of good, first of all, you can appreciate all that you've done. You can be closer to the monad. Okay? If you've done a lot of bad, then you will see for yourself all the hurt you caused in the world. okay? And you'll be further down from the moon ash. So this is how intuitively we've understood the universe to work. Okay? When we're born, we're born almost with an intuitive understanding of this. The problem is that as our populations continue to grow and grow, eventually we have war. Okay? And war gives rise to
as of today. These four countries, the ICSSs, are likely to continue their selective cooperation with each other, which could bolster their individual capabilities and threats to U.S. interests more broadly. However, currently these relationships are primarily bilateral on selected issues and depend on broader circumstances, divergent sovereign interests, and in some cases, concerns over directly confronting the United States. These factors, the ICSSs, are likely to constrain their relationships. Finally, conflicts on the continent of Africa are likely to persist through 2026 due to poor governance, economic demands, and external support. Tensions continue between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which could rapidly accelerate to conflict. Contentious national elections in Somalia could distract the federal government away from counterterrorism actions against al-Shabaab, which continues to conduct terror attacks while providing funding and propaganda support to other elements of al-Qaeda in Yemen. The civil war in Sudan continues, even as external negotiations occur. ISIS in West Africa and the Sahel have increased the intensity of their attacks against local security forces, expanding their areas of operation and moving closer to cities with the U.S. presence. The ICSSs that African governments will likely use their wealth in critical minerals to seek partnerships that deliver them meaningful benefit. Concurrent conflicts and crises across the continent will continue to put U.S. citizens at risk and cause further instability. In closing, as leaders of the intelligence community, we remain committed to providing President and policymakers with timely, unbiased, relevant intelligence to inform decision-making and to ensure the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gabbard. General Adams, Camden, Arkansas is the home of brand new production lines for the Israeli missile defense interceptors. Could you please explain how Critical Arrow and Iron Dome systems being built in Camden are for not only Israel's defenses, but the defense of hundreds of thousands of American citizen troops in the region?
Chairman Cotton, thank you for that question. And I have to say that the Arrow system and the Iron Dome system are critical defensive systems that prevent adversary power projection from impacting the targets in the friendly areas in Israel. The Arrow system itself is the high altitude, primarily against MRBMs, and it's proven to be very, very effective against those systems. The Iron Dome is more of a closer in system, protecting against rockets and things of that nature. But the combination of those two with U.S.
Iron Dome no está funcionando, papi.
Shield to prevent those attacks from the Iranians impacting key areas in areas where they're protected.
Thank you, General Adams. I was recently in Camden. Secretary Hexet is part of this Arsenal of Freedom tour, and they are greater candidates to do great work to keep our nation safe. General Hartman, we've often spoken about our pressing need for more cybersecurity manpower and part-time formation, such as the Arkansas Air National Guard's 223rd Cyberspace Operations Squadron are a great way to grow the force. What recommendations do you have to grow the cyber protection teams and develop more capacity for local and national missions?
Chairman Cotton, thanks for the question. I did hear a little bit about the great team in Arkansas there. I know the 835 CPT operates from that formation. And so for us, certainly looking at a number of different initiatives. One, ensure that we can share all of the relevant top secret classified information and other sort of indications and warning that the organizations need. But I will tell you, I'm an advocate for an ability to establish some sort of joint reserve cyber organization, and so that at Cybercom we can ensure that those organizations have all of the advanced training that they need to ensure that those organizations have access to all of the intelligence that they need, and to ensure that we control some level of funding at both Cybercom and NSA. that can be used to mobilize those personnel to handle the most difficult problems that we're faced with. And we have been working with Congress on some of that language and the department, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, General Hartman. As I said in my opening, we only have this one public hearing a year, even though the committee hears from each of you several times throughout the year in classified settings. So we don't often have a chance to tell the American people what great work their intelligence professionals are doing for them. So, Director Ratcliffe, could you take the opportunity to maybe join in the excellent briefings that Secretary Hegseth and General Kane have provided on a regular basis over the last couple months on the military aspects of both the Maduro raid and Operation Epic Fury to explain the CIA's contributions to those operations?
Thank you, Senator. Last year when I was here in my confirmation, I promised you all, and you had all asked for, a more aggressive CIA, one that was focused on core mission.
More aggressive.
Business of stealing secrets.
Más agresivo todavía.
Able to provide our policymakers with a decisive strategic advantage that would allow and advance and contribute to foreign policy.
Dios mío, están matando gente. ¿Qué más agresivo querés?
To the credit of the CIA workforce, the CIA has delivered. Some of those successes have been very public. As you mentioned, Senator,
Mataron a un viejito que estaba en su casa.
Operation Absolute Resolve. Flawless military operations like that are hostage to a flawless intelligence picture, and the CIA, as you know, from classified briefings, contributed in myriad ways to the success of that. But what I would say to you is those successes are just emblematic of the phenomenal progress and success really by every measure, every metric, every standard across every national security space with regard to the work of the CIA. Senator, you mentioned some of it in your opening. The increase of our asset stable and our human sources up by 25%. Our FI collection across the board, our foreign intelligence collection, 25% overall, and in important categories like China, for instance, up 100%. In areas like tech and AI, up 45%. On the counter-narcotics front, our operations up by 70%. And with regard to counterterrorism, those are classified numbers that I'll share with you in the classified portion of this hearing, but they're off the charts good. The best way I can summarize it, Senator, is I had a 32-year veteran of the agency retire this year, and he said to me, I hate to go. I don't know if this is the best year that the CIA has ever had, but it's the best year I can ever remember. And I think that reflects the current morale of the CIA. It's a workforce that knows it's doing a great job. It knows that it's being allowed to do what they signed up to do, which is provide that decisive strategic advantage to our country for great successes that everyone can see. So I thank you for the opportunity to let me recognize the CIA workforce.
Thank you. Director Ratcliffe, I want to address one specific threat from Iran, the threat of an intercontinental missile, which is really just a combination of two technologies. One, for us to get something into space and a reentry vehicle to get it back to Earth. Iran has always had a space launch program, which is flimsy cover for the first part of that intercontinental missile program. I haven't seen an Iranian astronaut in space lately. And second, they have medium-range ballistic missiles, which already have a reentry vehicle. So if you crudely married those two technologies together, I've heard some analysts say that Iran could have had a functioning intercontinental missile to threaten the United States in as few as 6 months. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, you're right to be concerned about Iran's development of longer-range ballistic missiles, Senator. If Iran were allowed to develop IRBM ranges, which is 3,000 kilometers, it would threaten most of Europe. And yes, as you mentioned, we know that Iran is gaining experience in larger, more powerful booster technologies through its so-called space launch vehicle program. If left unimpeded, yes, Senator, they would have the ability to range missiles to the continental U.S. It's one of the reasons why degrading Iran's missile production capabilities that is taking place right now in the Operation Epic Fury is so important to our national security.
Thank you. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Record Gabbard, the whole country knows that you were recently involved in an FBI operation to seize ballots in Fulton County, Georgia. Yet, this was despite the fact that the Warrens showed no foreign interference or nexus. As a matter of fact, the warrant was based entirely on conspiracy theories that had already been examined and rejected repeatedly. Now, where is the authority for you to involve yourself in a domestic law enforcement activity?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I appreciate the question. As you know, I have addressed every issue you've raised in detail in the letter, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. As you stated, Congress provided by statute ODNI with the responsibility of election security and counterintelligence in 2021. As you also know, ODNI has purview and oversight.
I know the history very well, but could you just answer the question?
ODNI also has purview and overview over two domestic related agencies, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, both of which have purview over election security responsibilities to ensure the integrity of our election. I want to correct one of your statements that you've made multiple times, which is false. I did not participate in a law enforcement activity, nor would I, because that does not exist within my authorities.
And we're present on the scene. Photos of you on the scene.
I was at Fulton County, sir, at the request of the president, and to work with the FBI to observe this action that had long been awaited. I was not aware of what was in the warrant or was not in the warrant.
What was the president's specific request?
Thank you.
What was the specific request that was made by the president for you to show up in Fulton County?
To go and observe the FBI's activities on this issue.
So why?
When you look at the four,
do you have the answer? Do you have the answer why the president was knowing about this affidavit before it was even served?
I'm not aware that the president knew about an affidavit before it was served.
And why was he sending you to Fulton County?
This occurred the day that the FBI had it approved, their warrant approved by a local judge, and they began to execute this. To address your question, sir, about the foreign nexus question. In order for us to better understand the vulnerabilities in our election systems that may exist today as we look to 2026, and yes, we are very focused on trying to make sure that this election is one that the American people have faith in.
I've got a number of questions. Director Gavin, I have a number of questions. Let me ask my next question, please. You have not provided any of the required reports or briefings to this committee on foreign interference. This is the first threat assessment since 2017. It didn't even mention foreign interference last year when you were already confirmed. It mentioned it at a high level. Are you saying there is no foreign threat to our elections and midterms this year?
As I stated in the outset of my remarks, this year's annual threat assessment matches the prioritization of threats and...
Please answer the question, yes or no. Is there foreign threat interference to our elections this year? Are there foreign...
Please allow me to answer the question, sir. The intelligence community has been and continues to remain focused on any collection and intelligence products that show a potential foreign threat for those who are...
So far, there has been none then because you've made no report system. Excuse me. If you want to ask the questions, you should have stayed in Congress. Please answer the question.
I didn't ask you a question, sir. I'm trying to answer your question.
So you're saying the failure to provide any reports or the failure to have any mention of a foreign threat assessment, I would draw the conclusion there must be no foreign threat to our elections in 2016. So that brings me a question that I have about you, ma'am, and Director Patel. There are reports that in 2020 the president was preparing an executive order to potentially seize ballots, bringing federal forces. There is a published report that there is a similar EO being drafted right now about 2026, citing China. Director Patel, do you have any knowledge of that draft EO?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I do not, sir.
Director Gabbard, do you have any? I do not. Thank you. Let me move to Iran. Now, I understand, I appreciate Director Gabbard's comments yesterday about agreeing that the president has sole authority, I guess, in his bones to declare whether something is an imminent threat. I didn't agree with your friend, Mr. Kent. But I didn't, again, I agreed with him yesterday on the fact that there was no imminent threat. I guess what I'm concerned about, one thing is, even in your printed testimony today on page 6, and the last paragraph on page 6, as a result of Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated. There have been no efforts to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. You omitted that paragraph from your oral opening. Was that because the president said there was an imminent threat 2 weeks?
Sir, I recognize that the time was running long, and I skipped through some of the portions
You chose to take
of my oral delivered
You
remarks.
chose to omit the parts that contradict the president. The president continues to say as well that he had no idea, he was shocked that the Iranians had moved to take over the Strait of Hormuz. Did you provide any intelligence that would say that it would be that it was not likely that the Iranians would try to move on the strait?
I'm not aware of those remarks, and I think those of us here at the table can point to the fact that historically the Iranians have always threatened to leverage their control of
Why would the
Strait of
president say he was
Hormuz.
amazed?
I'm not aware of those remarks.
What about the comments the president made that thought that he was surprised again, reports that Iran struck the adjacent Gulf states?
Again, I'm not aware of those remarks. We have
Well,
been
let me
and
ask you this.
continue to
Did
provide
you brief the president? Did you brief the president? Did you brief the president if he starts a war of choice that the likely result would be that Iran would strike adjacent Gulf nations and